for joining me for today's webinar. We're going to be looking at Flare Assist today. So that's a new AI integration that we've built into our Flare Studio application. It's designed to help improve the requirements gathering process and to build out your BDD scenarios. So I'm Mark, I'm from Test Evolve. We specialize in helping companies with their automated testing, be it against browsers, mobile app, desktop app, POS systems, APIs, security, performance. We cover pretty much everything, so we're available to help. So I won't take up too much of your time today. So this should take about 30 minutes, and let's dive right in. In terms of an agenda for the webinar, we'll take an overview of behavior-driven development, and then we'll dive in deeper onto things like the 3 Amigos sessions, BDD best practices, and some examples of good and bad BDD requirements. And then we'll do a demo of Flare Assist, our new AI integration. So we'll look at generating a feature from a requirement, generating a scenario for an existing feature, analyzing a feature, and we'll look at recording a test from a requirement that's been generated using Flare Assist. Let's start by taking a look at behavior-driven development, or BDD. So the idea is we want to create requirements that have a consistent format and a understanding that's shared between developers, testers, and business stakeholders. So a big focus on collaboration between those 3 groups. We sometimes call them 3 Amigos, which I'll go into in more detail in a little while. But yeah, the idea is that we are creating requirements before development begins. We're ensuring that everyone has the same understanding of what needs to be built. So we want to focus on behavior, not the implementation. So the requirements will describe how the system should behave, rather than focusing on, whether it's a drop down or a button or, some kind of information or technical detail about the implementation or the UI. So we're expressing these requirements in a given when then format. So the given will set up any preconditions for the requirement or the test, and the when step will be the actions that are required, and then the then step is the expected outcome of those actions. We also have the option to use and but, just to make the requirement language flow a little bit better if we need to add multiple extra steps. But the key is we want real world examples. So because everyone is on the same team here, everyone's building the same feature, we can use examples that apply to the business. So it's always best to use real world examples. We also, so these requirements will basically become our executable test scenarios. So any requirement will be able to be kicked off independently as an automated test against a particular environment that you could define. And then those results, those failures or passing steps will then reflect in your reporting. It also means that we effectively have living documentation. So a single source of truth of all the requirements will be in your passing tests, which I think is absolutely fantastic. But it's effectively any new build to an environment, or if you're going to production. But if you're running your tests in an environment, then you'll have the reports will be an up-to-date documentation of how the system is behaving at that moment, which is really powerful. And so given the language is understood by everyone, that makes the traceability to the requirements in reporting really, really useful. So throughout all of our Test Evolve reporting, be it local reporting or in your CI pipelines or in our cloud reporting platform, Halo, you'll always have this traceability to these given when then steps and the original requirement that the business, the developers, the testers all agreed on at the start of the project or the start of the development of the feature. So just looking at a report, it will mean a lot more to everyone in the team, rather than just having a tester specialize in understanding what is broken. Everyone will be able to see, okay, the email service is down because that the requirement will specifically state that the email service should behave a certain way, and when it doesn't, you'll get a failure in that step. So absolutely the best time to do behavioral driven development is before development, because the requirements drive the development. There are certain circumstances under which you'd need to kind of recreate this syntax in the future. Maybe you join a mature product, you need to convert existing requirements into given when then format. But the power in BDD is that it reduces rework. If you do it at discovery, you find all the issues with it. You discuss it with your team members, you find edge cases, or you answer all the questions at the requirements gathering stage. If you do that, it's a lot cheaper for the business and it's a lot less rework than finding them, at a much later stage in development. So digging a bit more into what a Three Amigos session is. It's basically where the three groups come together. It'd normally be face-to-face, although it could potentially be in a virtual meeting. But it's effectively a workshop where all the questions get asked to refine the requirement. So you take a requirement from the business, you'd ask questions, explore scenarios, examine real-world examples, and then the output from that would be the BDD scenarios. And those scenarios would be the requirements, a shared understanding of those requirements. So the members of the session would be someone from the business, and that could be a product owner or a business analyst. They're there because they are the domain expert. They'll have answers to questions, about the bigger picture. And why the feature is actually required in the first place, which can be really useful information that developers and testers aren't always given access to. So someone from the development team, this could be an actual developer who's going to be working on the feature. It could be a technical lead or architect. But they'll be thinking about how it will be built, so technically what is the information they need in order to get it developed. And there needs to be a member of the testing team there. So it could be, just a QA, a senior QA, junior QA, whoever whoever's going to be testing the actual feature. And they're there to identify edge cases, understand how to write verifications, how to validate that the requirement has been developed successfully. They'll also have knowledge of system issues, bugs that already exist that might actually impact what they're asking to be delivered, which could have an impact on timescales or even the functionality itself. The benefits of this session, you'd have a shared understanding early in the process of what the requirement is, and everyone will kind of sign up to it, agree what it is. You'll have fewer bugs because you won't be finding issues right at the end that have been identified earlier. So the questions that you're asking in this session will lead to acceptance criteria being created, and that means that you've got a signed off set of requirements that won't be found later, and I'll show you an example of that in a second. We shift left on quality, so you can't just test at the end. Testing the requirements early on saves a lot of money, saves a lot of time for the team, and you also get ownership and buy-in. If everyone's involved at the requirements stage, then everyone will understand what's going to be developed, but will buy into the process. Let's take a look at a couple of best practices when it comes to crafting our BDD scenarios. So the first up would be we want our requirement to be declarative, not imperative. And what we mean by that is that the scenario should describe what the system does from a user's perspective, not on how it's been implemented by the developers, not what the UI flow is to get you to that point. So an example here, you might want to replace when I click the add to cart button with when I add the item to cart. So similar language, but there's a couple of key differences here. To dive a little bit deeper into that, we don't want to worry about code reuse at the BDD scenario requirement level. That can be dealt with at other levels. The goal is not to reuse existing steps or craft steps that can be used in multiple scenarios. For example, the temptation might be to create steps like given I navigate to the login page and I enter my email address in the email field and I enter password in the password field and I click the login button and have all of those as separate steps, because then the thinking would be that those could be reused in future scenarios, and it's kind of an instinct for developers too. You don't want to write the code twice when it can be written once. But that's not the goal here. That's bad practice. Code reuse can be dealt with in helper files and in the step definition files, which are the layers below the feature file where we keep our scenarios. So instead, what you want to do, like in this example here, you'd want to group it. So when I was talking about the steps to log in, you'd want to just replace that with given I am logged in given I am logged in as an administrator. So all of those steps are kind of grouped into one. We're not talking about the UI, which could change. We're not talking about the flow. We're just saying, here is a precondition that needs to happen as part of this scenario to meet this requirement, and it's given I am logged in as a certain level of user. The key thing is we want to preserve the original requirement. We talked about the three amigos, so the business developers and testers have already created this language. We don't want to change it at any point to make it kind of reusable or anything like that. We want the language to be understandable for non-technical stakeholders, so we don't want to put too much detail in there about the UI. So yeah, and that's kind of a good rule of thumb. To bear in mind, we want don't mention a button being clicked, for example. The flow through the system may change. It may end up being a switch rather than a button. And then the test, isn't describing what's actually happened. You might change the code underneath to be a switch, but the scenario will talk about a button. So the test at that stage is effectively invalid. And when you're talking about, living documentation and executing a test and it turns green, you can't have the language in there being invalid. And UI changes do happen a lot, especially during development of new features. Design changes are quite likely, especially in an agile team. And there might also be cross-platform requirements. So, for example, these same scenarios could apply to a mobile app as well as a web page. And in a mobile app, you don't click a button, you press a button or tap a button. We want to rule out these things. We don't want to incorporate any of that into our BDD scenarios. We also don't want to constrain the developers. So if we start talking about particular flows or making UI decisions, it really does constrain them. So we want to keep our scenarios as high level as possible, but being very clear about what the business logic actually is for it, what the system should do from a user's perspective. So we've got a couple of examples here. So a bad version of a user checkout would be given the user is on the home page and the user clicks on a product and the user selects a quantity of 2 and the user presses the add to cart button. So it's really not very readable at all. It's not a very succinct requirement. Obviously it talks about the UI a lot, and that's not what we want. So a good version of that, a registered user checks out with items in cart. Given a logged in user has items in their cart, when they proceed to check out, then they are taken to the checkout page with their cart contents preserved. So that's a very well crafted requirement that a non-technical business analyst, for example, would understand. Develop and test, very easy to understand. Doesn't mention the UI at all. The next best practice we're going to look at is a very general one. These are things that should be taken into consideration at all levels of testing, really. So these are complete. We want our scenario to be complete, singular, and unambiguous, and testable. So what we mean by that is, for complete, we need all necessary information to build and test a particular feature. And BDD gives us a good blueprint for making sure that our requirement, our scenario, is complete. And that's with the steps, the structure of the test. So each BDD scenario should contain the context, the given step, the actions in the when step, and the expected outcomes in the then step. And only when we have all of these will we fully describe the behavior that we're intending to see. Incomplete scenarios will mean that you'll probably have ambiguous acceptance criteria. Some conditions could be missed in development, or when we come to test it, they could be missed. So completeness is very important. Next up, singular. So each scenario should test one specific behavior or business rule. The temptation is always going to be to have one requirement or scenario that tests everything along the path to avoid taking that path again. If you've got a really long checkout flow, having it test multiple things along the way so you don't have to do it again is actually bad practice. So each scenario should have a clear purpose and a reason to fail. So for example, if you're testing an order, you don't want to test that the order confirmation page is displayed and an email is sent, because if the email service goes down, then the test will fail and it will look as if you don't know whether it's the order confirmation page that's the issue. You don't know whether it's the email service. So it'll make failures easier to diagnose straight away. Scenarios can also be maintained independently then. Changing one scenario won't adversely affect another scenario as well. And we'll get more granular reporting as well. So as I said, if the email service went down, then all of our scenarios that have the email service will be down, and it will just completely muddy the waters if other scenarios that just happen to include that check also fail. So we also want our tests to be unambiguous. So a common understanding between business development tests, which obviously we talked about a lot with the Three Amigos. We want to avoid vague terms, so quickly or recent. These don't help anybody. They don't help a developer develop the feature. They don't help a tester decide what is, quickly. So we need to be more specific. So quickly could become within 2 seconds. Recent could become something like from the last 30 days. And testable. So every then statement must specify an observable, measurable outcome that can be objectively verified. I myself have seen suggested requirements for where the verification step is basically then everything is displayed as expected. So that's really not helpful. Not everyone on the team will know what expected is. There could be a lot of them that do, and it might seem like common sense, but it's important to document it and have it be something that's measurable. So something like then the user experience should be good could become then the page loads in under 3 seconds. So something that's measurable for a tester and can actually, say, yep, this requirement has been met. And so we've got the examples here. So the bad version would be very vague. The user is on the site. When they buy something, then everything works properly. And I think you can see that that's not great for anyone on the team to use for in order to develop the feature. So what we'd probably do potentially is break it out and then split it out as well. So a guest user successfully completes a purchase and the customer receives an order confirmation email after purchase. So 2 separate scenarios. Given I'm a guest user with a product in my cart, when I complete the checkout process with valid payment details, then I should see my order confirmation page with an order number. That's a really well-crafted requirement. And then we keep, as discussed earlier, we keep that order confirmation email verification. We want the test to be singular. We want both of these tests to test something different. So we just change the then step. Then I should receive an order confirmation email. Okay, so it's time to demo Flare Assist. I'll flip over to Flare and we'll take a look at the AI integration that we've built. And I'll show you how it can help in your requirements refinement process. Okay, so I'm on the project selection page here. Obviously, this new feature works with Ruby, JavaScript, TypeScript, any project that you already have. Could create a project here. I'm going to open an existing project, my webinar demo project. And this will just, as always, it'll install any dependencies that are missing. It will pass the project and then take me to the project home screen here. So on the left-hand side here, we have the tests page. So we'll click through to that. You can see we've got my features listed here. And on the right-hand side, we now have the Flare Assist panel. So there's a few options that we've got here. We can choose to convert a requirement to a new feature. We could analyze the selected feature, or we could convert a requirement to a new scenario in the selected feature. So let's start off by converting a requirement to a new feature. The purpose of this feature is to take a requirement in a form other than a BDD requirement and convert it to a BDD feature with many scenarios. So I've put a requirement in. It's quite a common e-commerce requirement for a wish list. So as a registered user, I want to be able to save products to a personal wish list so that I can easily find and purchase items I'm interested in at a later time. And then we've got a list of, acceptance criteria for this feature. So you should be able to view all the wish list items in one place. You should be able to remove items. You should be able to share the wish list with others. So if I click on Suggest Feature, what Flare Assist is going to do is it's going to use AI to craft a feature that takes into account everything we've talked about so far today, all the best practices with BDD, and it will create a feature that takes all of that into account. So here we go. We've got our personal product wish list feature. We can see that our user story has been preserved here, or slightly changed but preserved, the meaning behind it. And it's given us a few scenarios here. So sharing the wish list, removing products. It's generated us a pretty good looking feature here. And we're keen to provide feedback as well. So an explanation of why it's created the feature file. So for example, each scenario focuses on a single user action and expected outcome without UI implementation details. Scenarios are kept to 3 steps for clarity and maintainability. The feature addresses all 6 requirements mentioned in the original request. So an explanation as to why it's created what it has, which is useful for, developing your skills in writing BDD requirements. But we also give a bit of feedback, or we get a bit of feedback from Flare Assist. Have you considered? So what happens when a user tries to add a duplicate product to their wish list? Should there be a limit on the number of items that can be saved to a wish list? So all of these things will feed into the 3 Amigos session that we talked about earlier. So this is things that potentially we haven't thought about, we can see at this point. So for example, should there be limits on the number of items that can be saved on a wish list? That's a great idea. Let's say there is a limit of 10 items on the wish list. So I'll click on Suggest Feature again. And we can do this many times. So as it's suggesting things that we can improve, we can add that to the requirement on the left-hand side. It'll add it to the feature. It'll keep everything consistent, and it'll also keep providing us that feedback as to why it's done what it's done. So there we go. We've now got a wish list capacity limit. Given the user has 10 products in their wish list, when they attempt to add another product, then they should be prevented from adding that product. Okay, so once we're happy with what we've been provided from Flare Assist, then we can go ahead and create the feature. And we can see we've got our product wishlist management feature now in Test Evolve. Let's say, for example, you've had a 3 Amigos session, or you're coming to the end of a 3 Amigos session and you've done your best. You've crafted some scenarios. Maybe you haven't watched this webinar yet, so you potentially haven't used all the best practices that are out there for BDD. So we have the ability to analyze the feature. So if we select the Analyze Feature button on the right here, what it will do is it will take this feature, which is a login feature. It will look at the scenarios that we created. It will compare that to the BDD best practices. And Flare Assist will give us a star rating out of 5 stars. So you can see we've got 2.5 stars here for our login feature. And it gives us some feedback. So multiple scenarios have imperative steps with excessive UI element references, something we talked about earlier, and that's clearly true of the first scenario here. So there's an inconsistent user tense throughout, mixing first person, second person. which is creating confusion. Several scenarios lack completeness with ambiguous outcomes and non-testable assertions. So all of this feedback appears to be true. So we could go away and edit these scenarios, or what we can do is select the scenario, and then it will give us a suggested update. So for this login stuff scenario, what it's going to do for us is the scenario name should be more descriptive. It should remove all UI specific steps, consolidate the 9 steps down to 3, remove vague assertions, and this is what it's come up with here. It's login stuff. Given the user is a registered user with email john@example.com, when they authenticate with valid credentials, then they should be logged in successfully. And that seems like a pretty good update to me. So instead of my very imperative one that we've created here, I'm going to click accept suggestions, and that will immediately replace it in Testful Flare with the suggested one. So if we just select another one here, what's this one suggesting? So it's created one that's changed from first person, I am, to consistent third person. It's simplified the outcomes to focus on essential user experience rather than technical details. Great. And it's reduced 5 steps to 3 essential steps. So the output, or the suggested update, is now the user is a registered user with email john@example.com. When they authenticate with valid credentials, then they should see their dashboard. So the key there is that it's seeing the dashboard. So yep, I'm happy with that. I'll accept that. And you can keep going through and doing that. There's sometimes the scenario will be great, like this one here, and it'll have no suggested update for you. But yeah, that's kind of how you can use Flare Assist to analyze and refine and improve your scenarios on the fly. And last but not least, Flare Assist provides the ability to convert a requirement to a new scenario within an existing feature. So I've selected the login feature. Let me click on convert requirement to new scenario. And you can see the modal is very similar to the format earlier, except this time instead of generating a feature, we're going to be generating a single scenario. So on the left hand side here, we can add either a requirement or a manual test case. So just to mix it up, I'll use a manual test case here, and this manual test case is a description of signing up and then logging in. So let's click on suggest scenario. What Flare Assist is going to do is it is going to generate just a single scenario, but it's going to take into account all of the other scenarios in the feature and provide a consistent tense, a consistent tone. So it'll take into account everything that's already been created when it's created this one. As always, we have an explanation of what it's created. We think it's really important to keep providing that feedback as to why it's done what it's done, so we can all learn, and things that it thinks you need to consider. So you may have already considered them, but this could be useful feedback to then go and add another scenario, for example. So in terms of explanation, it follows declarative BDD principles, focusing on what the user accomplishes rather than specific UI interactions. And we can see that in the manual test case. Obviously, it's very specific about the UI, and it's talking about clicking buttons and entering data into forms. It's stripped all of that out for our BDD scenario. Yeah, the scenario is testable as each step has clear success criteria that can be verified. So that's fantastic. And in terms of have you considered, should email validation errors be tested as a separate scenario to maintain singular focus? That's a great idea. So you could potentially take that feedback and perform this again, but with the the next scenario that you want to create. Great. Okay, so once, in terms of part of the process, once everyone is happy that this this BDD syntax, this BDD requirement accurately describes what is about to be built, what needs to be built, then we can add the scenario to the feature. So I'll click on that, and there we go. At the bottom of the login feature here, we now have our new scenario. Okay, so let's do a review of what we've looked at during this webinar. We did an overview of behavior-driven development, what makes good requirements. We did quite a deep dive into Three Amigos sessions and BDD best practices, and looked at examples of good and bad requirements. Then we took a first look at Flare Assist. So I took you through creating a feature from a requirement. We analyzed and then updated an existing feature. And we added a new scenario to an existing feature. So just in terms of final thoughts I'd like to leave you with, Flare Assist should be used or can be used as part of your discovery process, but it absolutely should not replace it. It's not intended to be a shortcut. It's designed to supplement and help you create good quality requirements. Everything should be confirmed with the business. So if you generate scenarios and you're not sure about them, you shouldn't just use them. You should confirm with the business that it absolutely is the right language. It accurately describes the feature that is being developed or has been developed. And yeah, the most important thing in all of this is the collaboration and discussion. So using this should supplement that. It should not replace it. And yeah, this can be used to retrospectively create BDD scenarios for a regression pack. It's obviously not the ideal situation. Like behavioral driven development should drive the development. It shouldn't be a retrospective thing, but understand, if you've got an existing site, maybe a manual regression pack that you're automating, this can be very useful to create BDD scenarios quickly. But still, the most important thing is the communication with the other members of the team, especially the business, to make sure that what you're generating accurately describes what the system should be doing. And then finally, we use a third-party AI tool to power Flare Assist, but we want to assure you no user data is actually used for training. Okay, so that's it for today's webinar. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope that you found it useful. If you do have any questions, whether it be about the AI integration that we've demoed today, or about BDD scenarios, or about any of the other tools and services that we provide at Test Evolve, then please contact us. You can do that at info@testevolve.com, or you can contact me directly, mark.sweetlove@testevolve.com. So thanks very much for joining, and see you again soon.